Hi, I'm Anushka,
And I'm Saika.
and welcome to Girls at ADHD.
We're two ADHD therapists with ADHD here to help you laugh, rant, cry, and unmask your way through adulting with ADHD.
This season, we're back with more unhinged moments.
Except now with guests.
So buckle up, hit play at 2 times speed.
And come spiral with us as we make sense of our beautifully chaotic brains together.
Arjun did a lot of his in an Italian accent. I'm not sure why.
In an Italian accent.
Yeah, like Mario Brothers Italian, like
That man.
red.
Next time we have a board meeting, we're gonna, it's a Mish.
Walk in and also just say Technologia, and he'll get it. Like, don't know.
Technologia. Done. I'll put it in the board agenda.
Yes.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Girls at ADHD. I'm Anushka.
And I'm Saika.
And today we've got an incredible guest speaker with us. We've got Mish Kumar-Jonson with us. Big claps. So, Mish Mish is a South Indian non-binary queer neurodivergent and disabled accredited mental health social worker based on the unceded Kulin Nation's lands. As a therapist, researcher, and EMDR consultant, Mish integrates anti-colonial and healing-centered approaches to trauma work, especially with people of the global majority, to create spaces where folks can connect, heal, and embody their favorite selves. Mish explores culturally affirming frameworks within psychotherapy, and both their therapeutic and structural practices center cultural humility, identity-affirming care, and joy as tools for liberation and identity reclamation. Welcome, Mish.
Thank you. Yay!
Thank you so much for sending and sitting through that bio just before we started recording. We were talking about how awkward it is to just sit through a bio. So thank you. Before we start, I do just want to do a quick acknowledgement. Although this podcast is called Girls That ADHD, we know that ADHD, like gender, doesn't fit into a neat little box or neat little boxes. And I really appreciate, well, we both really appreciate you both being here and sharing your voice, especially as a non-binary person who doesn't identify as a girl or woman. The hope for this space is that everyone is allowed to explore the complexity of their identities, neurodivergence, and healing. So yeah, we're just really glad that you agreed to do this and you agreed to join on this podcast. So thank you.
No worries at all. And I think part of this is also just naming it and us having a conversation. It was something that we were able to, I was able to name and you were able to go, no, absolutely. And this is what we can do. And I think that's part of how we hold spaces together. So thanks for having me.
In regards to that, because today we are kind of unpacking the intersectionalities between neurodivergence and queerness. It's something I've been through, and I'm sure you've been through as well, because there's just so much masking in both contexts in terms of being neurodivergent, being late diagnosed as a neurodivergent person, but then also navigating the world as a queer person. Also, if you've come out as queer or realized you're queer later on in life as well. So I guess just as a starting point, because you work so much with people who kind of sit in the multiple margins of being queer, trans, non-binary, neurodivergent, what shows up most in those conversations around identity and performance? And then maybe we can go off tangents from there.
Yeah, no worries. It's a great question to start. And before we do, I just want to acknowledge that I'm on the beautiful lands of the Wurundjeri Wurrung folks of the Eastern Kulin Nation and just wanting to pay my respect. And whilst treaty was signed in Victoria, I just really want to say that there is more work to be done and we need to continue to advocate and push for liberation, reclamation, and self-determination for Indigenous folks. So just kind of want to start there. People sitting with this intersectional experience of the world, the question you asked is what comes up. I think what comes up a lot is really interesting of, am I just faking it?
Mm.
Which is really interesting because there was a person who, came for an interview once at the Iceberg Foundation and they were like, I don't know if I'm queer enough. And I was like, what the fuck is queer enough? And then, you start doing that thing of like, if you're driving a car and you see like police and you're like, have I drunk? Do I have a license? Am I old enough to drive? You start doing these things. I started doing that when I was sitting in front of them. I'm like, am I queer? Am I? And I had to be like, yes, yeah, you gay as fuck. Like, yes, absolutely. But I think that comes up so much of people going like, there are other neurodivergent people who are moving through the world and they're doing fine. Why not me? And yes, there's masking, but I suppose to answer the question of what comes up a lot is how am I not figuring this out? And am I enough / making it all up? Is my experience valid? Because it's not all, even if you meet someone within the same intersections as you, for example, doesn't mean they're still the same experience. And so you look at them and you're like, well, it's not completely mirrored, and if there's any autistic traits in that, you're like, well, that's clearly the rules and that's the framework. So, I don't fit very nicely within that. Does that make sense? So like so much of it is, yes, the masking in the world and all of that, but the internal struggle of, am I a person?
That's actually so interesting. I think what I heard from what you said is like, for neurodivergent people, we're just very literal. Like it has to be you're here or here, black and white. And it's very hard to like exist in a space where it is kind of a gray area. So how does one who thinks so literally, like naturally,
Yeah, I was gonna say.
yeah, how can we be okay with that uncertainty?
Maybe I'll take 2 steps back. Also, the other thing that comes up is so much of how do I navigate this world and be more productive, functioning member of society, right? And I often remind people, especially with intersectional identities and the compounding impacts of that, not only was the world not built for you, you are punished for being part of this world and you're punished for existing in a way that's outside of this. And so we build these incredible coping mechanisms that we call masking, right? And it's survival logic. It is based in deep ancestral roots. If we have to do this, so we have to be this. And then even that is then punished and seen as masking is a bad thing.
Yeah.
So then you're like, okay, so masking is not okay. Not masking gets me punished. What the fuck am I supposed to actually? Do you know what I mean? And then you're like glitching out. You're like, I'm a child. I'm just sit in my bed.
That is my life that you've just depicted.
I've just read Psychopath.
Yeah, just read me to filth.
So I suppose I want to start there in terms of like, why do we think so literally? It's because the grey is so filled with rules that apply some ways and doesn't apply some ways. And so people are like, how do I be less literal? I'm like, well, if you were less literal and you were operating with the grey, is it safe enough to do so? Does that make sense? Like, is the grey your kind of grey? There are times I don't have to be very literal, but if I don't, it means there can be miscommunication, which can then have huge impacts, not only within the double empathy problem of, say, autistic and holistic or ADHD, not ADHD person, whatever, but also between 2 autistic people who are coming with their own lived experiences. And maybe one's a person of color or one's a trans person, the other one's not. So yes, I agree. How do we navigate within the gray? I think part of it is, how do we also know that miscommunication is going to happen and just stop and be like, what did you hear? What did I hear? What do you need? What do I need? And have these micro conversations rather than these big macro ones being the only conversations.
Well, I mean, it's that concept of like small change is still change, and those little things add up over time, right?
Absolutely. And I can give you an example, actually, if that would be useful.
Yes.
So I'm married to someone who's also an ADHD. And on our first date, we'd never met before. On our first date, I was like, so when were you diagnosed? And he was like, with what? And I was like, oh, baby girl. Okay. I was like, you ADHD as fuck. And she was like, nah. And I was like, I ain't asking. Like, there was no inflection in my tone. Like, this is well-founded. See your diagnosis. Here's your certificate. And I was like, also you're autistic, but you're not ready for that. That's cool. That's cool. That's cool. Like, we'll do that later. It's all good. And now she's like, I think I'm autistic. I'm like, been 4 years. I'm so glad you caught up. But so much of what we have to have these conversations is, what are you hearing me say? What did you just, hear? Because, for example, there'll be something and there'll be a sarcastic comment and I'll be like, what the fuck actually just happened? Because and she'll be like, well, you said this, at no point did I say that. But I think part of this is even within each other, even within the neurodivergent community, there has to be the like, hey, there needs to be some skills around like, hey, I'm trying to explain,
Yeah.
or I'm talking at you, or I'm trying to give you more information, not because I think you're stupid, but just because I feel like I'm not explaining myself, So I suppose that's
Yeah.
how, in some ways, I navigate the grays.
You name it, right? Like you're actually explicitly naming the things so then everyone's on the same page.
It doesn't always work, I will say. Like, it's not a foolproof method because sometimes you're like, oh no, this person knows exactly what I'm talking about. Or I think we had a conversation, and 6 months later, you're like, we had different conversations. We did not have that same conversation. So
I was talking to somebody recently and like I like going on tangents, but then this other person was going to go on a tangent and I was like, "Ah, like don't go on your tangent." I said it out loud and in retrospect it was dumb. And he was like, "Can you just like let me go? You go through a million tangents a day. How come I can't just have my one?" And I was like, "No, you're so right." But I'm like, I know what you're going to say. I know what the conclusion is.
and that's the thing, right? Like, what is it? The mandible or the jaw, sorry, is the closest stim to the brain. And
Mhm.
sometimes we just have to be able to do that to get it out, even if the other person knows where we're going. And even if they know, you're like, fuck, I know, but I've just got to do this. Like, I've just got to get it out. And that's a hard space to be in and hold as well.
We're already existing in a world where we're always trying to think, are we doing this right? Is this acceptable socially? Is this something that will and also like as a queer person, is this how I can exist and not get like social backlash for it? How much of it is our responsibility
Yeah.
versus, how much do we just go like, nah, fuck this, I'm just gonna be me?
Yeah, and this is actually something I've been thinking about a lot because I'm someone, if anyone has met me, I'm very much a chest first person. I am
Yes, I love it.
very chest first. I will say the thing, but also I'll just move through the world,
Yeah.
because I think part of that is I know I'm going to bump up against something and fuck up. And
Yeah.
I hope that there's enough relational courage between people
Mm.
to let me know, and I think I put a lot of trust in people to be like, mm, can we just have a conversation about this? And someone actually called me the other day and was like, don't know how I felt about that. And I was like, thank you. Tell me more, like, let's actually have this conversation. And I just want to preface of like, I am a very just move through the fucking world because I've spent so long like trying to do this with the world and trying to tightrope. And that is more exhausting for me than moving through the world. And so I've been thinking about this a lot lately because I've come up against a few bumps and I'm like, okay, how much is mine? How much is someone else's, And I remember in social work days, there was a lecturer, I can't remember who they were, but there was a lecturer who came and spoke to us, and it was around communicating, with your participants and stuff like that. And one of the things they said was, it's really easy to either take the victim, hero, or villain role. So the victim role is, I'm really trying here. You know how much I'm trying. You know how much I put into this. You know that I just want the best for you, like that. The villain role is, fuck it, I'll do it myself. You know what? Don't worry about it. Like, fuck this. I can do that. The hero role is, I can take it all.
Yeah.
I can take it all. Like, I'll just do it. Absolutely. I'll just do it alone. And I can do all three of them. I'm not immune to any of them. I can absolutely do them. And I absolutely love when someone's like, do you need to do it all by yourself? And I'm like, no, but that's the only way to do it. And, I think anyone who's worked with me knows this, that I'll be the first person to put my hand up and be like, I'll do it. Don't worry about it. I'll do it. Like, and for me, that makes it a little bit easier because then it's like, I don't have to put it on someone else. I don't have to do that. And so it's that thing of how much is mine, how much is someone else's. I don't know. I'm figuring it out as well. But I think it's that relational thing of, I know my capacity,
Yeah.
but I don't know someone else's capacity.
Yeah.
That's where I step into the don't worry, I'll do it bit, or just give it to me. But I think I'm learning to be like, well, you said you'd do that. So, and that's hard for me as a person. So I think, to answer your question of like, when can we say fuck it? I think part of this is intuition and relying on the people around you. Like, I'll call up my friends. Like, there are 5 people or 6 people I'll call up and be like, this is a very biased view that I have of the situation. What do you, you know? And then distill that down with my values and be like, do I want to continue this? Do I trust that they'll call me in? Because
Yeah.
sometimes I don't know if I trust that as well, and kind of go off that. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's how I try to navigate the world.
This is so like, and I love this theme keeps coming up in all of our episodes around how important your support systems and your community is, because when you're talking about trust as well, and it's building up that support around yourself where you can trust within them to know that they're going to call you out on your shit, or like that they will reassure you where you need the reassurance, or like that it's always going to be an open and honest conversation.
When you're also looking at queerness and neurodivergence and being a person of color, and especially I think someone who has maybe come to these unceded lands. I was very privileged to come when I was much younger, and so I had that kind of exposure to the culture. But I see so many people who come over and they're like, but I was taught I had to be this and this way to be professional. And then now you're telling me I should be more quote unquote authentic, but I don't know who authenticity is because I've spent so long whilst I was in my own culture learning someone else's.
Yeah. And it's like you handed me a script, so I've been trying to follow that script because you told me that that's what's gonna. And it's survival. It's an inherent survival mechanism, right? Because if I go against the norm, what does that mean? Will I get outcast? Will I not get the opportunities that I need for life, etc., etc.? So it's like, what do you do? Because if I had to be my authentic self, bro, that she's great, but sometimes she's a bit hectic. Like I don't know if everyone can handle that. Like that, it can get a bit chaotic.
Absolutely. And I think to Michelle, like my wife, I'm incredibly blunt as a person,
Hmm.
but to everyone else. And I remember saying to a friend recently, I was like, I have to say 3 things in my head and be like, nope. And it helps being a plural system. And whilst, yes, a lot of trauma, and I have to kind of do that because there'll be a person be like, nope. And then sometimes one will slip through the keeper and people are like, and I'm like, fuck, that was the mild version that slipped through. So much of therapy is supporting people not to unmask because I don't believe in that either,
Mm.
right? But it's about the choosing of this is how much I want to give here. This is how much I can give here. This is where I do want to be a little bit, XYZ. It's that
Hmm.
choice based on
Yeah.
need because there'll be some days where people are like, I'm good. Like I can fucking get through. And then needing to recognize, okay, you were good and you needed to get through and you burned through quite a bit, and so you
Yeah.
might need to like change the mask or level that out a bit more. So I suppose it's sitting with people and learning choice again and befriending choice rather than
Yes.
I love that. That's so beautiful.
Befriending choice. How does one, like someone, say, I think all 3 of us, we've kind of took our time. We're all therapists and we've done all the training. We've worked with a lot of participants and we do have quite a bit of experience to just like reflect, understand ourselves and do all the work that we need to do to get to this point. As someone who's just starting out on this journey or is kind of like in that confusing bit of like, what the hell is happening? Who am I? How would they start, as you said, befriending choice?
you can only make the choices if good choices are available to you, right? So many people are like, I didn't make a good choice there.
Yeah.
And I will ask, was that choice that you feel like you should have made, was that available to you at that time?
Yeah.
Hmm.
And a lot of people will go, well, yeah, but it comes with these massive consequences. And it's going, okay, so is that actually available to you?
Yeah.
You know, no, it's not actually available to me. So then you can't make that choice, right? This comes from quite a punitive lens of going, I should have, could have, would have, but didn't. You actually couldn't. And so part of befriending choice is actually recognizing what choice do I actually have?
Mm.
I really like that.
And then choosing from the suite of options because I think a lot of people are like, well, there are infinite possibilities. I'm like, well, for the life you want to live in your favorite self, I don't know if there is infinite possibility. I feel like there's maybe two.
It's like the potential of what could have been, essentially, and we get stuck in the problem solving space instead of looking at like the reality of like the situation.
Absolutely, 100%. And so I think part of befriending choices, for me anyway, it was about just recognizing. And I know, like, as a small example, this morning when I woke up with a migraine, and I was like, should I just call and be like, I can't do, this episode today because I have a massive migraine?
Yeah.
And I was like, is that a choice I can actually, like, genuinely make? And I was like, yes, because I feel like both of you would have been like, absolutely. And I knew that, and it was genuinely a choice I knew I could make, and it was a choice. But there was a voice being like, but it's not a choice I want to make. I want to be on here. I want to have this conversation, and not because I'm forced to, but because I've been looking forward to it the whole week. And so I think it was allowing that suite of options of like, we can push it back. It's okay. These are the options. And then trickling through and being like, okay, this is the one I want to pick and I'm at peace with it. It's about actually figuring out what the choices are. And sometimes the choices, no, you have to go to this thing.
Yeah. There's no other options.
There is no other options. Okay. What do I need to do to bolster myself? It's not a choice I'm making because I can.
Yeah.
It's a like, oh, fuck, I'm forced to.
So, like, categorizing what things are, like, what choices are choices you can actually make, like what things are flexible versus what are things that you must do, and kind of categorizing that first.
It's like a flow chart, the way that Mish has explained it.
Yeah, I'm seeing it as a flow chart.
Yeah, in my head, I'm like, oh, maybe we should make a flow chart. It's kind of like almost like a discipline matrix, because then you can, if you're forced to do something or there's no other choice but to do that thing, you can then decide what supports you need in order to, like, whether if that's preventing the burnout that comes with it or the tiredness or whatever else it is, you can put things in place for yourself, right? But it's such an identification process along the way.
Absolutely. And I think for me, I've also befriended burnout. And I am not, hey?
You do it well.
The wildest thing that Mish has ever told me, because it's like the amount of stuff you do and the amount of work you do is wild. And then the wilder part is you told me that you've never experienced burnout.
Yeah, that
No. No. Time out. No. I have absolutely experienced burnout. Well, I just mean I don't burn out right now because I have absolutely experienced burnout.
Okay.
Shitty work situation. Oh my Lord, have I. But that was because I was forced and I had no choice.
Yeah.
And so I think I've befriended choice knowing of like, will this tip me into really hard? Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
For me, it's never centering like I shouldn't get to burnout. I'm like, I'm going to get to really distressed and really like angry and frustrated, and I'm going to vent.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to be like, okay, what them choices be?
Yeah. Befriending choices, a lot of it sounds like being able to be in touch with your intuition and being able to just be in touch with your capacity and being okay with that. How does one do that if they spent their whole lives not doing that?
I think as a system, we have to have a lot of chats internally and compassion. And there has to be a lot of compassion. There has to be a lot of like, hey, sweetheart, you're really trying. Yeah, I see that. Yeah, and this is how I'll speak to myself. I see it. And yeah, that didn't land for that person. And yeah, there might be friction, but I genuinely know you're trying. Or I'll be like, honey, I get it. I know you're really tired, but we do have to get out of bed. Come on, love.
Yeah.
And this is the voice I'll use, to myself.
Yeah.
I know what it's like to berate myself.
Yeah.
I have a part who's called Phil, who, God bless Phil. But Phil, walks around is like, you call this productive? Interesting. Have you thought that you're a piece of shit? Thanks, Phil. Thanks. I really
Have you considered?
Look, I'm just asking. It's like Phil is kind of like the safety guy, turns around and be like, that's a piece of shit. Thanks, Phil. I spent a long time on that, but I really, no, I see it, Phil. Yep, cool. And then it'll be like, Phil, like, I hear that you're trying to do your best. I hear that you're trying to get us to a place that you think we can be at. But Phil,
Yeah, just calm down. Yeah.
like, wherever you're trying to get us, we ain't going there. We're going the opposite direction.
It's not helpful.
But have you tried a bagel? Just shut the fuck up and have a bagel,
You tried a bagel.
But I think so much of that is compassion, and so much of that was coming back to body. And I had such a privilege of having to have a somatics practice from a young age, being someone who played sport and then needing to really know. And at the start of the day, you would take your pulse, so to know where your pulse was sitting. And so I've always had like that somatic practice of coming back to body. But this morning, I was like, oh, the back feels tight and tender. I'm like, oh, I did sit a lot yesterday, right? And it's like, oh, honey, you really wanted to go for a walk. You didn't get there, but you got all this done. And that's why you sat a lot, and I just think so much compassion and coming back to self of you're really trying. And then sometimes being like, yeah, I think you can have a bit more capacity. Like, come on.
Yeah. It's that fine line between giving yourself, like being self-compassionate, but also like not letting it slip. Because I think that's something that clients come back with a lot. They'll be like, oh, but if I'm too compassionate with myself, then what if I everything just falls apart and I don't end up doing anything?
Yeah, but also it's like when they ask me that question, I'm also like, well, you've been living without self-compassion all this time, and how has that been working for you?
Absolutely. And also, like, one of the things I really couldn't stand, this is a very strange metaphor, but stick with me, is when the AFLW first started, one of the things a lot of commentators would be like, oh, they're so shit. Men are so much better. And it really used to get to me because I used to be like, yeah, because they've had so many years, so much money. It's a literal career. Whereas women have to do this and be parents and have jobs. And are you fucking joking? Like, shut the fuck up. And, I kind of think of that when people are like, well, the compassion's not going to work. I'm like, yeah, because the criticism and the berating is $1 million industry with a massive super fund and pay and great benefits. And compassion is working 3 jobs trying to figure it out. Like,
yes, more, I guess, of the favorite version of myself that I am. It's like the less fucks I give about what this $1 billion industry of criticism wants from me and like wants to make money out of me, because I'm kind of just doing things my own way and I am more relaxed. So that is so true in terms of like all this marketing is to make yourself feel bad and question yourself so that you keep paying and buying things. But this is like a whole episode on capitalism.
And so many people have been installed from such a young age, especially when you're sitting within those intersections that we've started talking about of what success looks like. Success looks like don't be killed, because that is very real for so many queer folk, especially folk who are trans and gender diverse.
Yeah.
Don't burn out, which is impossible, right? And have these, a successful career, which is based on colonization, which is based on patriarchal values. So much of this is, in order for something to succeed, it has to continue forever.
Yeah.
And it can't just be like we step in and step out and we just try things and it doesn't work and we try something else. And I think so many people see that of ADHD and see that that's such a bad thing of like, you tried this, it didn't work, you moved on, it didn't work, you keep.
Yeah. They're like, where's the consistency?
And for me, the consistency is I'm still showing up and I'm still fucking trying.
I'm trying,
right? And that's it. And so I know I come back a lot to the parable of the choir. It's like, how do we do this and how do we hold each other? Is this thing of the choir technically can hold a note forever if people step in and step out as they need to based on their capacity and how much they can hold a note, right? And I very much see that for not only the work I do and the Iceberg Foundation and stuff like that, of like, there will be people who step in for some time, we'll sing together and then step out and, and hopefully we can kind of hold each other in that. But it's that intersectional piece of, you still have to think about, okay, how does my queerness need to step up a bit? How does if I'm a person of global majority, if I'm, trans person if I'm a neurodivergent person? How do I figure that out? And I think it's heaps and heaps and heaps of really loyal conversations. There's a quote of like, in these really terribly stormy seas, we owe each other a terrible loyalty. And it's that bit of, I don't think people are being dishonest. I think people are trying to figure it out for themselves and, trying to have this conversation while trying to also hold the other person. And I'm like, I hope we can just be loyal to each other and be like, this is where I'm at. I'm really trying. Does that make sense? Like,
Yeah.
my neurodivergence has changed a little bit and this is where I'm at.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it also sounds like you were able to do that because you've like actually intentionally built this community that you are able to have these open conversations with. I think that kind of that is the commonality, I think, between the three of us, where we are blessed with like finding really great people and communities, whether that is in work or just personal lives.
Well, that's also taken time, right? It wasn't like we all just like started off with great communities. I think over time we've the more that we've learned about ourselves, the more that we've then decided like, yeah, I want to vibe with this person, or this aligns with my value versus this doesn't. And then that circle has gone from being like quite big to like becoming smaller and smaller. And you can do things like ramble with each other. And that's why we started this podcast, because I used to call you and we'd shit talk with having ADHD. Like, and we were like, oh, we should record it for other people. Whatever it is, like in terms of being able to check in with each other and call each other out on the things that we need to as well. But like that takes time to build. So if you're like listening and you're like, oh, but like I don't have this, it's okay. Like you'll find your people, but come back to that self-compassion and like learn about yourself as well first.
People please
Mm.
and shape shift. And it's that thing of, for people listening, of like, well, I do that and I can't not do that. I would say, if you need to do that and you understand you're in, for example, a job or in a relation or whatever that is, where you have to do that, recognizing that that will have impacts.
Yeah.
Mm.
How do you hold that or mitigate that or build things around that, while you need to get through that bit? Because people, and I know myself, especially when I'm an employee, like I will work fucking hard, right? And I will really work hard and I will give it my all. And this is where I literally said to my wife the other day, 100% for a neurodivergent person is not whatever you have on the day. If you only have 10% to give and you show up with 10%, that's 100%
Yeah.
technically that day, right? And it's that thing of, I need to perform, because so many of us are told we're too much, you're not enough, your mind doesn't work, or, all this stuff. And so there's this performance. But then underperforming or what people expect is, then you're like, but I know I can do better.
Yeah.
And this is where I think it's about the building practices around that, to be like, okay, it's not just the doing or not doing. It's the, how do you actually hold whatever you're doing with intentionality?
Yeah. Because otherwise you end up doing things for the sake of doing them, because again, it is performative. It's like I've hit these checklists, but we don't sit within what we've done, and then we ignore it, and that like it just adds to the cycle of everything, right? Like how many neurodivergent folk like go through, do the things, hit all the milestones, but like actually sit down to like acknowledge and process the fact that that's something that they've done. It's just like, oh, I need to do the next thing, need to do the next thing. I'm not doing enough, and you're right. It's a narrative that we're taught.
Absolutely. And we don't get dopamine that way.
No.
Once we've finished something, we're not normally, people would often get a motivation and then the dopamine of that. We don't do that.
Yeah, we're just like, oh God, another thing to do after this.
Yeah. And for me, as soon as I do something, I'm like, I can tick it off. And I'm like, cool, what's next? I'm like, shut the fuck up. Just
yes, shut up, Phil.
Phil. Poor Phil. He always gets so criticized and he's always like, I'm just here doing my job. And I'm like, I know.
And you're like, you're doing it well, but
A bit too well. Like, go have a pickle.
go home.
Just that. But knowing that it's going to have an impact, and then how do you actually build systems in place so when it does have an impact, that you can employ those systems and not fall back on those systems, but they're part of all of it, and then stopping when you're like, okay, I'm done. That being okay. That's not a failure. That's cool. Did that for a while.
That's a big thing, isn't it? Redefining our like failures, what counts as a failure and what doesn't.
Yes.
Yeah.
And what counts as effort. Like the other day, our board, who are also great friends, were like, start writing down all the things that takes effort. And I was like, nothing takes effort. And they're like, write down the things. And I was like, that takes effort. Right. The first thing I wrote down was writing down my task takes effort. It was a bit sassy. But even that of like so much we do, we don't think it's taking effort or having an
Yeah.
impact or but it is, and acknowledging maybe it's not draining you, but it's still taking
Yeah.
or it's spending those energy points as well. Especially people socialized as women.
Yeah.
There's so much pressure to be palatable
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
and to be grateful. Lord have mercy. And I've talked about this on a podcast before. Have we taught to be grateful for the opportunities?
Everything.
Every opportunity.
Every opportunity. And I think that's one thing my mother did incredibly well was, yes, sure, there was a thing about be grateful, but there was the go fuck up, go figure it out. I'll be in your corner. Like, as long as you're happy. And that'll be the first question. My mother constantly, every time, she's like, what do you do again? And every time I'm like, Mum, I don't know. And then she'll ask my wife, and Michelle will be like, and Mish does this and then this. And Mum's like, I still don't get it. Because for her, she doesn't actually give a shit. Like, she's like, you good? You happy?
Yeah.
Because Mum was like, we didn't get through all we went through for you to then be not happy. So that pressure, I think in some ways for me to be palatable wasn't always there from my mother. Sometimes it was, but not always. But there are so many people, so especially socialized as women, who just have this incredible pressure to be palatable. And if you're not palatable, be seen as, but then I won't have that support around me, it's
Yeah.
then what's my identity? And so I just want to name that pressure and the cost of being palatable and what that actually costs us, I think is so much. And sometimes we don't recognize that of it sits heavy in the body. It sits heavy for
It
me. I
does.
know in like the gut, in the uterus, in the shoulders, in the neck, like it just sits. And so many of the times I have to be like, we're not going to be palatable, and it's a choice I have to make.
I mean, I'm really happy that your mother didn't put that pressure on you too much, but I did grow up with that pressure. I mean, I'm still living with my family and I go through that pressure all the time. But what has helped is finding people and community that let me fuck up and are like, do whatever you want, we'll be there if you fuck up. And that has made like the biggest difference in how I perceive myself and give myself permission to show up as myself.
Absolutely. And because so many times men are allowed to. Men are allowed to be boys, go off, do whatever,
Be angry and have feelings and not like something and complain about things and all of that. Yeah.
Absolutely. And so much of what I think women and trans and gender diverse people get hit with is, oh, that's a phase. And I'm like, literally everything in life is a phase.
Literally everything.
Literally everything in life. So just I wanted to name that palatability because there's so much around the tone policing. And for example, the other day, a friend of mine sent me an email that they were going to send, and they were like, "What do you think?" And I was like, "Great points, a bit blunt." And they were like, "Do you think too blunt?" And it was funny because I was like, "If I would say it's blunt, and I think they said to me, "Do you think it's too blunt?" And I said, "I can't say that for you. I
Yeah.
don't know if it's too blunt. I think it's really valid, and I don't want to be a tone police, and I don't want to tell you should you be palatable or not.
Yeah.
But you figure that out." And I think it's just that of having people who can be like, great, but interesting about this, and not have this carceral kind of policing.
Again, like all of this, I think this whole conversation has just like reminded me how much of our existence relies on, or like what's good or bad relies on consistency of some form, being consistently one thing or another thing, and like not having like, I don't know, this social norm of like not being divergent essentially in any aspect of your life. Because for some reason that's too big of a concept for people to understand, or like, for us to grow up with, that you're allowed to chop, change, try, and evolve
And fuck up.
and fuck up.
Yes. This is life.
And also, when you fuck up, having people around you,
Yes.
like, I see it. I see you were trying, you know. Yeah, this is where we're at.
Not people that are not necessarily even people that are going to come back and be like, "Oh, you didn't fuck up." Like people who can name the fact that you fucked up, but that's all right.
Yeah, that's all right.
And sometimes it's not okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes it's not okay, but like they will tell you in a way that won't make it sound too much like Phil.
Nah, bro, I'm gonna adopt this with you guys now. I'm just gonna be like, yo.
I will say, whenever I do fuck up, Phil is in the background like, ooh, you don't need me.
Feels like you got this.
Phil's like, I don't want my name on that. Hell no. And I'm like, wow, Phil, the one time, you know? Why didn't you say anything? Phil's like, oh, now you want my opinion.
A lot of these things we talk about, we do talk about a lot of the challenges and things living in this world as a neurodivergent. And today we talked about a bit of intersectionality between queerness, being queer, and neurodivergent. For someone who's listened to all of this and kind of is like, oh my God, what am I gonna do? Everything is like, the world is against me. Where do I start? I don't have a community. I feel like too much. What is one gentle reminder that you would love our listeners to hold on to this week?
Center joy.
Mm.
I love that.
Yeah.
You know, and one of the things I often talk about, and I didn't today, which is really interesting, is especially when you said, how do I befriend choice? I'm like, befriend joy. Know what that feels like, know what it tastes like, know what it smells like, know what it, you know, really feels like in the body, the color of it, the shape of it, the texture of it, all the different ways. And find it in the big things and the little things, find it in the moments. And just, yeah, befriend your joy, find your joy.
That's so beautiful. I love it. Hey, Mish, if our listeners have to find you,
Have to. If they have to find you, please, please don't. If they have to, they have no choice but to.
there's no choice.
No choice.
No choice.
They can find me on Instagram on the neuroqueer. I think it's the neuroqueer EMDR therapist. I think I'm also on LinkedIn, Mish Kumar-Jonson, not Mishma because I'm Mishma when I'm in trouble. Mish is great, thank you. Phil uses Mishma a lot, and I'm like, and yeah, I work at Neurum EMDR and at the Iceberg Foundation. And
We'll put all of these in our show notes.
please label it as when you have to.
When you have to.
Only. Do you have any other choice? No.
All right, you can contact them.
Absolutely.
Thank you for joining our podcast. And hopefully we'll have you on soon.
Thank you. Thanks for the conversation.
That's all for today's episode. Thanks for listening.
And remember to follow us on Instagram and TikTok at Girls That ADHD for more ADHD realness, to ask us questions or slide into our DMs with episode ideas.
And sign up to our newsletter at girlsatadhd.com to stay updated on new episodes, toolkits, workshops, and book in ADHD coaching if you're ready to work with your brain, not against it.
And if you found this episode useful, leave us a quick review because it really does help us reach more ADHDers and help them find us in the chaos.
Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.
Bye!